And, Sitch, this is, I want to be respectful to you. You've been perfectly civil to me. Please
Thank
don't
you.
take this as a
I won't.
personal
You can go hard on me.
attack.
Call me an idiot.
No, but I
Look,
Again,
I beat
think
up on Sitch
I
all the
would
time. He's
I
got
would
thick skin.
say
but thank
I
you. I
would say
appreciate
the video that I watched with
Yes.
1.1 million views, I would say it's intellectually dishonest.
Thank you.
You made a video that attempted to reframe the conflict of Gamergate in a way that I don't know how to describe it except a blatant lie. One of the things that's changed in my thinking today versus Gamergate is I've come to the conclusion that male loneliness is one of the very biggest problems that we face in America. I think that we are, for multifactorial reasons, creating a lot of dangerous, very isolated young men, right? And I think during the Gamergate era, we tried like marginalizing these people or making fun of them or kind of shaming them and hoping that would address our problems. That does not seem to have been a fruitful course of action. So
No.
the conclusion I've come to is that we need to invest as a society much more in targeted ways towards boys' mental health, right? And I would have zero problems with a program that was set up for whatever dudes do. Y'all know better than I do. Like playing basketball together. I don't know. Like stuff around the country to help boys
Video game development.
playing video games together. I would love to see a national Splatoon.
No, making video
that
games.
would be great. What I'm saying is, for something that was targeted like that, I would not have a problem with that disproportionately benefiting men, because I think even though there are a lot of really dire statistics about what young women are going through, I think it's pretty clear that men are facing something that's even worse.
I want to go back to what you said before, which is that, during Gamergate and definitely after, there was this acceptability of attacking young men and I would say in a very sexist way. And one of the most common ways is to call a guy an incel.
Yeah. Or a neckbeard.
Right, or a neckbeard. But incel specifically, and it's kind of funny because, like, to call a guy an incel is literally playing into the patriarchy. It's literally playing into misogyny, because it's saying you as a male don't have worth because you weren't able to fuck a woman. And so it kind of like makes women just a sex object or a trophy for guys to fuck. And yet it was weird because people who were supposedly, on the pro-feminist side were totally fine levying this insult at guys. And so it's kind of like, that's what I'm seeing right now with like a lot of that acceptability of that is kind of like the acceptability of, racism against white people, which even though, guys and white people don't necessarily face the same levels of systemic racism or sexism, even from a left perspective, that those attacks and that mentality pragmatically and consequentially, I think, creates more sexism, creates more racism. So it seems like there's nothing but a loss from doing this. And I think the left would gain a lot from just coming out and blanketly saying, no, we're not doing this anymore.
No, I do, with the caveat that, as I understand it, incel was what they called themselves, where the term originated.
Yes.
I've long been outspoken about, not using the phrase neckbeard, right? I think if you would, I think attacking someone on the basis of their appearance is, it's a gendered slur, right? I don't think that I don't think that men are facing the same pressures of being dehumanized in that way as women are, but I think it's not good, and I think pragmatically it's not smart. I mean, there's a lot that I would do differently today versus 10 years ago during Gamergate, because I agree with you. I think the approach that I took, with the caveat that I was always talking about systems more than I think a lot of the other major figures of Gamergate were, because I was talking about trying to get more women hired at the bottom and building out the issues with the game industry, like from a public policy perspective. You can find hundreds of my statements on that. But I do think that there was an approach to it of thinking we could shame men into better behavior. And I think that has been proven to be spectacularly false, and that's something I have a lot of regret about with those years.
Well, that's good. I mean, I give you massive credit for coming to that realization. I wish more people come to that realization.
In that same way, do you have any? I mean, I have to tell you, dude, I watched your video on Gamergate.
Yeah.
It was like hold on, I just want to say this. It was like an alternate fucking reality.
In my understanding, I could be wrong. Like I said, I don't know much about it, and I'll let you and Sitch kind of correct me if I am wrong. But I feel like there all of a sudden was this stereotype of gamers, that they were all pieces of shit, sexist meatheads. And a lot of people said, listen, I like to play games. I have friends that are girls. I'm not a piece of shit sexist. And I don't like this stereotype being foisted upon me as a gamer. So it was really a fight over these stereotypes. So what is your take on Gamergate?
Mine?
Yeah. What is Gamergate?
I think it's respectfully, I think it's fairly ridiculous to say that the center point of focus during Gamergate is the gamers that felt hurt by some of the stereotypes that were coming out. The central people that were affected by Gamergate were the women that were being targeted by rape threats and death threats and having their careers destroyed. And Sitch, this is I want to be respectful to you. You've been perfectly civil to me. Please don't take this as a personal
You can go
attack.
Call me an idiot.
No, but
I beat up on Sitch all the time. He's got thick skin.
I would say the video that I watched with 1.1 million views, I would say it's intellectually dishonest.
Thank you.
What I saw. I don't know how you talk about Gamergate and not even mention the fact that multiple women were bullied out of their careers. Talk about people getting rape threats, death threats, me being run out of my house. I got swatted literally about 4 weeks ago, right? This Gamergate stuff never ended for me. And I think I found it astonishingly intellectually dishonest.
What do you think motivated the energy behind Gamergate?
I think it was about harassing women.
So you think that the people who were like really on board, that was the energy? They're like, we just want to harass women. Like you think that's what they thought about themselves when they were doing it?
I think that, I told this story a lot. And when the Gamergate TV show comes out, this person ended up being one of our main characters. That the show.
Can we just give like a background for someone like me who, like, what is Gamergate? What are we talking about here? What happened?
Gamergate was the first salvo in the culture wars of how we argue online. Basically, it was about a woman in the game industry started getting targeted after an ex-boyfriend wrote a blog, and it exploded in a gender war that ended up with a lot of women quitting the game industry.
Okay, so it started off as like the opening salvo in basically this kind of cancel culture attitude on social media.
No, it wasn't.
Gamergate was the start of how we argue online.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, to me, the thing that's interesting about, and this is why I asked the question about what was motivating it. To me, that was interesting about Gamergate, because my video came out 2016, so it was 2 years after Gamergate. Even though I was on the internet, but I wasn't making videos back then. The thing that's interesting to me about Gamergate, it was kind of the bigger version of Atheism Plus, where you see this sort of the beginning of the shift publicly of kind of big swaths of the left moving from liberal to sort of more anti-liberal ideas. And the thing with Gamergate was, you have, Zoe Quinn's boyfriend comes out, or ex-boyfriend, I guess, comes out, accuses her of infidelity and doing all this stuff for her video game. I don't know if any of that stuff was ever remotely true.
It wasn't.
But essentially,
parts of it weren't true, but go ahead.
Right. I'm sure it was hyperbolized and, things of that nature. But essentially, when those accusations came out, there were some very small areas of the internet and some small message boards and on 4chan where people were discussing sort of this, these accusations. And to me, like, if that's all that would have happened, then Gamergate never would have existed, because, people would be talking about this drama and then it would just dissipate. But the problem was that once people were talking about that drama, and I don't know if it's because, this is sort of the beginning of wokeism, or if it's because Zoe Quinn herself had a lot of connections in a lot of these industries, you had a lot of these websites start blocking people from talking about them. And then they were all like within a day or two of each other. You had a bunch of different gaming publications all release a bunch of articles that were basically using, the story of people, harassing or talking about Zoe Quinn as a jumping off point to make broader statements about how the gaming industry and gamers themselves were all essentially sexist. And that to me is what kind of sparked, Gamergate, and what sparked a bunch of people's interest, because it's kind of what you were saying, Adam, where essentially a large swath of people were just levied the accusation against them that they were all sexist pieces of shit. And a lot of people were like, like, what the hell? Like, you can't just attack me out of nowhere. Like, you don't even know me. So to me, that was the motivating energy of Gamergate.
So there are a lot of factual inaccuracies with what you just said. For starters, Gamergate didn't start with Zoe Quinn. It started with Anita Sarkeesian and feminist frequency. So in what year was this? It was 2012 or 2013. A feminist academic, Anita Sarkeesian, launches Feminist Frequency, where she wants to look at tropes in the video game industry and basically do it on a YouTube channel. Reactionary gamers freaked out. They targeted her. She started to be the subject of death threats, bomb threats, was literally run out of one public speaking engagement. And that playbook started to spread to other women in the video game industry, including one woman that was bullied out of Polygon for suggesting that Giant Bomb, who had never hired a woman in their whole history, should hire a woman. They harassed her, went into her past, and basically targeted her and made the price of speaking out so high it was easier for her to just literally quit her job. And that was a pattern that happened over and over and over again. Eventually, they went after Zoe Quinn, and eventually they went after me. So Gamergate is the start of how we argue online today, which is, you find someone you disagree with, and you want to shut up, and you go through their whole past, and you find something to attack them with out of context, right? In ways so disconcerting to me is today, it's not just the right wing doing Gamergate. I told you the story of Tory earlier today. That was a pure Gamergate tactic there. So it's this tactic that has come and poisoned politics on the right and the left, but a lot more proportionately on the right.
So regarding the Anita thing, so when I said like where Gamergate started, I'm referring to like where the name came from, where the movement came from. Obviously, which was directly related to the Zoe Quinn situation. Obviously, there was Anita. Obviously, had a lot of similar energy before Zoe Quinn stuff came out, because Anita came out, as you said, in 2012 with Feminist Frequency, and she received a lot of criticism, which I don't know if it was all justified, but I think a lot of it was justified. She definitely had a radical feminist viewpoint. She wasn't just advocating for the idea that, we want to have more female protagonists, or we want to have more, female characters in games that aren't just trophies. I mean, she was definitely coming at it from a critical, radical feminist perspective. I mean,
did you watch the videos? That's not true at all.
One of her most famous quotes was literally to say that everything is sexist, everything is racist, and it was her job to point it all out. And that's coming from a purely critical perspective that, everything in society that's created by men has sexism embedded in it. Everything created by white men has racism embedded in it. And that was definitely the philosophical perspective she was coming from with her videos.
I can't defend every quote in every Anita Sarkeesian video. I think directionally, if you look at those videos, they were a fairly academic critique about some tropes in video games that we need to think about. A really good example is I grew up gaming in the 80s, right? I think about Double Dragon, right? What is the objective in Double Dragon? The gang comes out, punches Jessica, boom, you see her underwear as they carry her over her shoulders, and then your reward for being the game is going and saving Jessica. She's thinking about tropes like that from a feminist academic perspective. It's very dry, it's very technical, it's very fact-checked. And honestly, like, I wasn't a massive fan of them. They were far too dry for me.
They were very boring, yes. That's true.
But I think what the reaction is the disproportionate backlash. The woman is entitled to her opinion. it's a free speech issue. And I think when you have literal video game developers in the industry taking her face and making flash games where you can beat up Anita Sarkeesian and make her, bloodier and bloodier, and, her getting bomb threats called in to speaking engagements at universities. I mean, this is the problem. It's not a single line in the video. It was the disproportionate backlash, the intimated violence.
Yeah, no, obviously I don't agree with people calling bomb threats or threatening anyone for the free
Right,
speech.
but you left all that out of your
well,
video, which is why it was so
hold on.
dishonest.
Right. So hold on. So I'm not obviously in favor of any of that. I'm in favor of everyone being able to have their opinion and free speech online. But I'm pointing out with Anita, just I'm saying that her position is significantly more radical than just saying she just wants, women to be portrayed positively in video games. It's significantly more radical than that. Okay. Now
don't
she can
think
say
she
that.
said
That's
that,
her free
yeah.
speech, but that's what her position is.
Did she say that?
Yeah.
What
do you mean?
I
She said
saw
that
yeah. What I saw the outcome of the video was looking at a lot of it was called Tropes versus Women for a reason. It was thinking about the tropes in the video game industry and making you aware of them and hoping that the industry would make different choices. She said over and over again at the beginning of every video, you can like things that are problematic. You can appreciate media even if it has these themes. She said that repeatedly.
So I think the part of the animosity towards her was that it seemed like people were in the gaming industry were listening to her, or at least they were making overtures as if they were listening to her. And since they felt like her critiques were so far out there, not all of them, but a lot of them, there was this worry that I was like, oh my God, this is going to be, as we called back then, this was the PC police kind of coming into, another field and kind of gonna, PCify everything.
Do you not think games are stronger if you think about, like, are we treating half of the player base as if they have no value beyond being sex symbols? I mean, I think that's just good business, right?
Well, obviously, okay. So again, obviously, I'm not against having women characters be protagonists in games, having female characters be more than sex symbols. If that was literally her base of her critique, and she was coming at it from a liberal philosophical framework, there would have been complaints about her, but I don't think there would have been the massive complaints that she got. I mean, I'm trying to remember because it's been, a million years ago. The two things that stick out in my mind from one of her videos, besides, the quote that I already told you, was, her famously complaining about how in one of the Hitman games, where there's a level where you're in a strip club, you're like, she criticized the video game for objectifying women because you can like pick up the body of a stripper and throw her in a closet or a dumpster. And everyone was like, well, I mean, first of all, in Hitman, you can kill anyone. You're not supposed to kill a stripper. You can kill anyone you want, and you can drag them around as an object and throw them in a dumpster. So it seems like a weird thing to say that this is like a sexism that's happened in the game. And then the other thing I remember was her criticizing Borderlands 2, which to me was even more bizarre because Borderlands 2 is like super pro-feminist. And for her to criticize the fact that a female character essentially like is sacrificed to save an entire planet's population, so much so that, and then Anthony Birch, the writer of Borderlands 2, like ends up agreeing with her about this. It's just, I don't know. There's a lot of weird stuff that was going on there that I think her positions were far more radical than you're giving her credit for.
Well, my position here is like the degree of radicalness of her opinions is completely exogenous to the point that I'm making, which is, and I'm trying to do this politely, but in my estimation, it's one of the primary targets of Gamergate. You made a video that attempted to reframe the conflict of Gamergate in a way that I don't know how to describe it except a blatant lie. You didn't mention any of the death threats, the rape threats, the bomb threats, people having to cancel engagements. I was ushered by a former Secret Service person just trying to get into PAX East because someone on the floor had taken a picture of me and talked about stabbing me with a knife and how they were going to be the chosen one. You just conveniently leave all this out and reframe it as like this attack on gamers. And I'm with you that I think there are ways we could have talked about this more constructively, but I think this is some Orwellian shit, man.
So my motivation for doing my video in 2016 was because, if you type in Gamergate on Google, you'll find every single article by every single publication that says Gamergate is a harassment campaign. If you look it up on Wikipedia, and I remember this at the time that Gamergate started to form, there was like this massive fight on Wikipedia about whether
Yeah.
it should be, neutral, or whether there should be, have a perspective in the fight. And obviously Wikipedia ended on the perspective, because if you look it up, it's Gamergate is a harassment campaign. And so I'm over here thinking, well, I think there needs to be the other side of the story, the people that support Gamergate, but don't obviously support the harassment, which, I mean, I guess I thought at the time
You didn't say
that I guess I should have said that, but I
Yeah.
would have expected, when I was making the video, I thought like, well, obviously people who watch my videos know I don't support, attacking people, because my channel was very all about free speech at the time when I made that video. I should have, you're right, I should have put in something that said like, obviously I don't support, people going out and harassing people. But I thought that would be just sort of the implicit message of the thing. But this is why I asked in the beginning, I said, what do you think the motivating energy is for Gamergate? Because Gamergate was a lot of people, it was a big movement. And
Sure.
I don't think that like 99% of people, I don't think 50%, I think there was a small amount of people that were involved that were doing this harassment. And I don't think it's necessarily fair to say that the entire movement was the embodiment of that harassment.
I think directionally, yeah, I do think that was fair. I think it was so interesting. I was just doing Netflix a few weeks ago, and one of the people that's going to be in this show that comes to Netflix. This is a different show than the fictional one that's being developed, but he's actually a Gamergater. That's one of the key moderators for Kotaku in Action, which is basically Gamergate headquarters on Reddit. And we've become friends over the years, right? And I know for him it really was about ethics in game journalism, and he did care about that, and he did have a problem with the wokeism, and was incredibly consistent in calling out the harassment. So I do think there were individual ends of this, but as one of the, I gotta tell you, I did a lot of research on Kotaku in Action back in the day, and 8chan and 4chan. And I think directionally, the average person that was involved in those movements overwhelmingly hated us, right? They didn't believe any of the death threats or rape threats were real, and they were very much enabling that. I think what you may be referring to, that I think you're conflating, is there were people on the side, just ordinary white dudes in the video game industry, deeply resented this idea that people like Lee Alexander were putting out there to the public, like gamers don't have to be your core audience, right? And I think there's a discussion there to be had. Were those tactics helpful? Were they right to feel disrespected? Are there things we could do differently? To me, those answers are yes. But I think if you're talking about Gamergate itself, I think you're talking about some people that were very willing to turn a blind eye to some things that caused an immense amount of personal destruction.
Yeah, I'm sure that there were people that like that. I remember at the time on Kotaku in Action, like the threads that I saw, there would be a very big push, at least publicly, I don't know what's happening privately, publicly, to not harass people, to not harass you, to not harass the Wakeman, to not harass people whatsoever. Obviously, since you personally received, death threats and things of that nature, like that's going to be, your focal point for this. And then my focal point, since I didn't receive any death threats, and I was just, a random white dude on the internet on Kotaku in Action and these other things, and sort of looking more at the ideology that was kind of motivating the movement. That's where my focus was on. I think the interesting thing to me about Gamergate 2 was that this was kind of, and I think part of why it became about journalism or gaming journalism was because there wasn't really the language that a lot of people understood to really explain what was going on with this sort of everything is sexist, everything is racist ideology. People didn't really understand what that was yet. Now we have the word woke, and before that we had social justice warrior and all that other stuff. And so I think people were just kind of at a loss to really try to understand what's going on here. So I don't know. I guess we just have different focal points about what Gamergate was about. I don't think we'll agree, but
well, I think that the difference in assessment here, and I think like you're talking, the Wikipedia came to this conclusion. The reason the Wikipedia came to that conclusion is, every major news media organization in the world looked into this. And I can tell you, as a subject of many of those interviews, I answered some incredibly hostile questions. Like it was because there were a lot of like people that were disinclined to believe us. It was an uphill battle getting our story out there. Something I'm very proud of for Gamergate is I personally helped swing that narrative greatly by moving away from the gaming press and talking more to the New York Times and Washington Post and ABC and all those places. I think I would suggest the reason the Wikipedia article aligns with my view is all this major media looked at these events and came to the conclusion I was telling the truth and Gamergate was not. So, that's my explanation.
Yeah,
for
well,
that.
Well, I mean, in Wikipedia bases, bases like, you can cite, as long as you can cite a news article, essentially,
Right.
that's how the story is formed. But I mean, the issue is that, this is my contention, is that basically all the mainstream media, especially around Gamergate, was incredibly biased. And I think a lot of the mainstream media still today is very left-wing biased. I mean, we just saw recently the whole thing with like, the City Bike Karen story, which I don't know how familiar you are with that, where the media at first was incredibly biased against this lady, calling her racist. I mean, you had, NBC and ABC national news literally going to where she lived and knocking on her neighbors' doors and, saying, hey, black neighbors, what do you think about this racist lady? So I think,
I'm sorry, you cut out for a second. Are we talking about City Bike Karen?
yeah,
Oh,
I was
y'all
saying
are
that,
dead on with that. Yeah.
right. But yeah, exactly. So, but that's my point is that, like, I think that the mainstream media is very biased towards the left. So I'm just saying, I don't think saying that just because the media felt one way about a situation, I don't think that's good evidence that that's the correct viewpoint of a situation.
I think with City Bike Karen, I think it's a mistake to attribute that as right versus left. I think you're falling into the laziness and sensationalism bias that exists in media, and I think that is the
Well, the
bias
same thing with
there.
Kyle Rittenhouse and the
Sure.
Covington kids, and we see this time and time again. I mean, I think it is a left right wing bias. I think the left gains political power by focusing on calls of racism and sexism.
Yeah, they
I
forwarding
think
the stereotype that all white people are racist Karens.
I think with Gamergate, it was so deeply reported that if there was an argument against, the reason my reputation improved after Gamergate is because I always told the truth, and I didn't have anything to hide with what I was saying. So I think if there was a different story out there, I think people would have told it.
Look,
Well, I think
go ahead.
part of the problem with Gamergate was it seemed like the only people interested in trying to tell the other side was Breitbart, which I think is a highly politically biased in the other direction publication. And I think that the fact that Breitbart was the only one willing to do that, I think, is actually what drew a lot of people in those days to the right. Was that
I
essentially
can tell you,
felt
as
like
the
their identity
subject of
was
some
being
Breitbart
attacked?
articles, that was entirely erroneous journalism. I had many discussions with lawyers about suing them over some of the things that
Oh
they
yeah,
said.
Breitbart is not a
So,
trustworthy publication by
right,
any means.
right.
Sure, but that was my point. But anyway, so I don't know. So
So
I
your
think we're not
point is
gonna.
that an untrustworthy publication that I can tell you objectively just made a bunch of stuff up and
No, my
was,
point was that
yeah,
there were no publications that I saw really. I mean, I think Kathy Young did some blog piece about this that was trying to be neutral, but there wasn't really any publications that seemed even remotely interested in trying to understand what the other side was in Gamergate back in those days, except for Breitbart, which is not very trustworthy and is obviously completely biased in the other direction. And they were doing it purely for political Machiavellian reasons, so trying to sucker a bunch of kids. So.
well, I think I would agree. Again, something I've said repeatedly on media, I keep waiting for this to come back and get me canceled by the left, is I do think that the way we approached it created a lot more chaos in the game industry than we solved. And I think that we made people more aware of what women faced in the game industry. I think directionally there are ways we could have approached what we wanted and gotten better results. So I would do that drastically different today if it went back in time and did 2016 again.
I mean, and there's also, I forgot about this. There was the whole thing with the game journals list too, the email list, where it felt like a lot of game journalists were sort of trying to band together to create a narrative behind the scenes, and it seemed like that narrative won. And so that's why I made the video, was just to kind of push back on that narrative.
You don't
but-
think that maybe they came to that conclusion? Like, I share your critique that
Mhm.
game journalists in my industry, in my experience in the industry, are respect to them. They tend to be a cliquey group of kind of unpleasant people to be around who are very judgmental, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think they take their jobs seriously. I think the difference in our perspective is you're attributing this to a malicious motive. I think they looked at the facts and came to a conclusion that you just don't
Mhm.
like.
I don't think it's malicious. I think it's that these are people that believe ideologically in this, like, everything is racist, everything is sexist worldview, and so it's very easy for them to look at the situation and can come to that conclusion automatically because it already fits with their worldview.
Here's the story. I probably shouldn't share this because I don't betray public conversations, but Steve Butts. I had a 2-hour conversation with Steve Butts, the editor-in-chief at the time of IGN, really upset with him about his publication's relative silence on Gamergate, despite the fact that Samantha Allen and a lot of women had literally been run out of the industry. I thought it was an ethical responsibility to get him to do that, and he did not feel that way. Game Informer did the exact same thing, but Steve Butts in particular. Then it comes out years later with Kelly Flagg that he had been, there was some really credible accusations about sexual misconduct during his tenure at IGN and the way he treated women employees, right? So it's hard to not draw the conclusion that the reason he did not cover this stuff might have something to do with his approach to women, right? I can't remember the last time I saw a byline by Steve Butts. So, from my experience, the ones that did not cover this, especially in the case with IGN, it's because they were dealing with some real cultural cancer behind the scenes.
Right.
Do you
Well, I mean,
have any
that's
thoughts about that?
well, but I mean, to me, that's kind of the problem. It's like, I mean, I don't know. Obviously, I don't know anything about what Steve Butts did whatsoever. But my problem was that during the Gamergate time, there was this you have to choose sides attitude. Like, if you don't choose side, you're a misogynist. You're letting the misogynist win. And I think that attitude is part of what, fueled this. Like, theoretically, IGN and a lot of these other gaming sites shouldn't necessarily be involved in, like, cultural battles and political battles. They should, be talking about video games, as video games. And that's
You
really
really think
the
if
extent of it.
Samantha Allen, a writer at Polygon, is being targeted and her past is being gone through, she's getting death threats to the point she concludes it's smarter for her to quit her job than continue? You don't think that's an industry fucking issue?
What did she say that got everyone pissed off at her?
She was critiquing Giant Bomb for not hiring women. Giant Bomb, which was owned by ABC at the time, had a pattern again, that whenever an opening came up, it was always, boom, just magically a white straight dude that was on camera. And that was the person they hired, just over and over and over. And she critiqued it after Ryan Davis died.
Because I'm trying to remember, I think part of the thing with her was that, now maybe she didn't feel this way anymore, but people dug up, she had some, like, Tumblr posts where she talked about openly being a misandrist and hating men, and that she, wasn't.
But we're getting off topic here. I hear you, but my point is,
well, no,
if
but
she's
my only
being
point,
run out of the industry, how is that not an industry issue? That's a workplace issue.
Right. When you say run out of the industry, like, so she was receiving harassment, so she decided to quit, right? That was, like, in emails and things of that nature. So again, I'm not in favor of anyone,
threats, rape threats.
I'm not in favor of anyone being harassed, at all. But it's like, does that mean that IGN should have to talk about it? I mean, should IGN say, like, well, if IGN said, listen, we're not in favor of anyone harassing and we're in favor of free speech, I would be on board with that. But the problem was that this issue stemmed around the censorship of free speech, so it's kind of difficult for them to take a stance like that.
The issue stemmed around the targeting and harassment of women in the video game industry for talking about what we experienced.
Right.
To the point that I could give you a long list of names of women that quit their job and never came back to the industry after Gamergate. That's what it was about.
Right. But that's why I said we're not gonna agree on this issue. So
I think it's a workplace issue, and I do think that's worth covering.
Maybe.
Hi, you just listened to a clip from the Sitch and Adams show. If you like what you heard, you can listen to our live show right here on this channel on Sunday, starting at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. And if you want, you can super chat us. We read $20 and up super chats on the show and then do a follow-up stream on the following Tuesday where we read the rest of the unread super chats and interact with fans of the show. Subscribe to this channel right here to listen to the live show or to listen to more of our awesome clips.